Well, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing in exciting Dubai? This is my first time here, so show of hands, who else is here for the first time? Okay, so I'm not alone, nice. I've spoken for the IIA since 2006 at many venues, International Conference 4 times, and never fails, I seem to be usually the last one of the day before there's excitement, not only the welcome reception, but other things in this fabulous city here in this part of the world. I can't tell you how many auditors I've come across in my vast experience so far. And everybody is unique, everyone is different, but I will tell you this, no one has ever been ignored, at least not from me. So I'm glad that this concept of trusted advisors is becoming a global phenomenon. Not just because Richard Chambers is here on site with his book called Trusted Advisors. It just so happens we tend to preach the same topic. So I'm really happy to be here discussing this particular topic with you all. So, how many of you in this room consider yourself a trusted advisor? Okay. How many in your organizations think of you as a trusted advisor? Different question, right? We'll get to the nuances of that as we go through this presentation. Look, the concept of trusted advisor is not new, but it's taken on greater meaning these days. In this era, trusted advisor is a validation for all of us in this room that what we possess in terms of knowledge and experience can no longer be ignored or underestimated as far as the impact it can have on the organization. So why is trusted advisor so important? Simply put, it's the central perspective that we as auditors have for the entire organization, from top to bottom and across. There are certain traits that every trusted advisor has. I like to focus, I've listed several here, I won't go through every one of them, but I like this one down here called reputation. By the way, if you haven't had the copy of the slides, I've been told they'll be made available. They were available, and then I don't know what happened. I can't explain that because I saw them myself, and I was ready to download them, and they disappeared in a flash. Maybe they were sending me a message, I don't know. So, but this notion of reputational integrity, to me, I've been in the government sector, I've been in the private sector, I've also had, and now obviously I'm in the public sector. And there's one risk that is overarching for every organization. Anyone care to guess what it is? Right. Somebody want to speak up? Integrity, that's certainly a way to put it. I'm thinking of the R word, it's reputational risk. Everything falls under reputational risk. I've had many debates on this. You can do it in silos, HR, finance, manufacturing, and many other functions of the organization, but all of them funnel up to reputation. Anyone hear of a gentleman named Warren Buffett? Yeah? Do you know Warren Buffett? Because if you do, I'm wondering what you're doing here. But this is a gentleman who's obviously very wise, very intelligent, very rich. He's gone on to say that reputations are built over years, but it takes 5 seconds to erode that reputation. And then once it's gone, it's gone. It's very difficult to get it back. Companies like Volkswagen, Facebook, and others are learning that firsthand today. That's why I harp at reputational integrity and the role internal audit does to preserve that integrity and, of course, the organization's goodwill status in the industry in which it participates. So I'm going to make this an interactive session. It's unlike other sessions you may have throughout the day and throughout the conference. I tend to walk around. If you see me a little bit erratic in how I walk or how I move, it's because I have Parkinson's disease, so you have to forgive me for that. But I'm going to ask you throughout this program, I'm going to test you, and I'm going to use the Socratic method. If you don't raise a hand, somebody who looks very astute, I will just pick on you and say, what do you think? Okay? Just to keep you awake, because I know you got better things to do later on. So for the next 3 hours, just bear with, I'm sorry, for the next hour, just bear with me. How would you define the term trusted advisor? Somebody give me a concept. A word, a sentence, a phrase? Anyone? You're looking fine looking gentleman. What do you think? You knew I'd do this, right?
It's actually someone who would need from the first, let's say, CEO or the board with contact for advice.
For advice. Out of all that, the key word is advice. That's a good answer. Are we in a position as auditors to advise? Yes or no?
Yes.
Really? And how do we provide that advice? What do we call that in the audit report?
Recommendation.
Thank you. Somebody once questioned me saying, well, wait a second, if you're going to give advice, how do you maintain your independence? Fair question. I said, well, we provide recommendations. We don't tell people what to do. We simply say, here's a recommendation based on what we've assessed. It's up to you to figure out what needs to be done and the controls you want to implement. Just understand that we will be evaluating those controls at some point. All trusted advisors have some common traits, and we're going to dissect some of these as we move into the presentation. But honesty and integrity, proven experience, subject matter expertise, exceptional skills and abilities, and the last two, I don't want to diminish by any means, clear client focus. How many of you have financial advisors? A few. I have one. How many of you have health advisors called doctors? What is their focus, financial advisors and doctors? You. As auditors, our focus is fiduciary responsibilities to the organizations that we participate with, that we serve. Now, you'll have to forgive this. I've been told that we were allowed to do polling, and then literally minutes ago I've been told that it's not going to work. So I'm going to ask the question to the audience, and you're just going to raise your hand. Are you, and I asked this earlier, and I want you to raise your hand again. Are you considered a trusted advisor, yes or no? How many of you would say, not sure? Brave souls. I want you to, when you leave here and you look in the mirror next time you get up, you tell yourself you're a trusted advisor. A true consultative answer, maybe. It depends on the time of the day of the week, right? And the client that you're working with. So how do you achieve trusted advisor status? Everybody gets up in the morning to get ready. Anyone here look in the mirror when they get ready? I know it's a softball question. Everybody looks in the mirror, right? What do you see? I want a brave soul. Tell me what you see in the mirror. How about you? What do you see when you look in the mirror? Confident person. Very nice. How many people just say, "Oh, I see my reflection in the mirror"? Everybody, right? Well, I'm gonna challenge that. I'm saying there's more to that mirror than meets the eye. Just like there's more to a book than you can't judge a book by its cover. The concept I'm trying to get to, oops. I hate these clickers, they tend to move really fast on me. I want you to start thinking about how others see you. How you see yourself, how others see you. How others listen to you with their eyes. There's a strange statement, right? How do you listen with your eyes? There are certain attributes for every trusted advisor. I mentioned the mirror motif first because that's where it starts. It starts with you. You don't become a trusted advisor until you tell yourself you're a trusted advisor. In Greek mythology, in great Greek leaders, everybody hear of a gentleman named Aristotle? Pathos, logos, and ethos. I'm talking about ethos here. I'm talking about strong sense of self. What you have is what people will see in terms of what you share verbally and non-verbally in the reports you write, the conversations you have, the client meetings you have, the audit engagements that you have, both introduction and closing, etc. There are three categories for every trusted advisor. They are character, competency, and credibility. Can everyone relate to those three C's? I try to keep it pretty simple. There are attributes within each of these categories. This is not an exhaustive list. This is a partial list. We can spend an entire session just on each one of these categories. But for purposes of today, they told me to keep it brief and brilliant. So I said, okay, well, we'll focus on these three categories and these particular attributes: honesty, skills, and experience. Does everyone here consider themselves ethical and honest? Does anyone not? Nobody, that's good, okay. Skills. This is the one I will harp at the most, because this is the one that people tend to see most frequently. This is what you showcase every single day, with sometimes not even knowing it. And then lastly, experience, not because it's the least important, because it's the most obvious. Let's start with character. As auditors, we need to be independent and objective, yes? So there are a couple of axioms that I've developed over, or I've recognized over time, that I apply in everything I do. Constructive criticism versus adverse judgments. Anyone know the difference? Constructive criticism for your audit clients versus adverse judgments. Adverse judgments is what gotten the internal audit profession the reputation that we're so desperately trying to change. We're not just watchdogs. We're here to basically assess in an independent, objective fashion. That is what they do. Let me start by saying, internal audit, what's the first word in internal audit? Repeat, just say it out loud. What does that mean? We're the same family. Do families argue?
Yeah.
Okay, so but we move on. We move forward. We don't just keep going backwards. But how many times have you been in an audit engagement and you haven't had the best receptive audit client? How many of you have had an angry audit client? Oh, look at how those hands go up. I'll get to that later on in this session. But constructive criticism, not adverse judgment. This is not about finger pointing. This is not about saying, hey, you did this. You need to improve this. This is about objectively assessing what must go right and what could possibly go wrong. Actionable and practical recommendations, absolutely. What's the point in using 15-letter words if, number one, it's not understood by the person who's reading it? What's the point of using technical jargon if the people who are assessing it don't really understand what you're trying to say? So what I'm not saying dummy down what you're saying. I'm saying use your communication skills, and we'll get into that in fine detail, to make sure that your recommendations are actionable and practical. That leads me segue into the competency category, which is really about skills today. Everyone recognize these skills: leadership, analytical, managerial, conflict, project management, problem solving, listening, reasoning. How many of you have some of these skills? How many of you have all of them? Well, you get a gold star. Now, you weren't able to download the slides, but here's a pop quiz for you. See this little question mark down here? What do you think that skill is? Anyone?
Communications.
Who said that? Both of you. Gold star over here. Communication. And I'll tell you why. We'll start with a simple model. How many took communication in college or school at some point in their life? They used to have this really incredible busy model. They had sender and receiver. They had encoder and decoder. And in the middle, they had this thing called noise. Well, to me, that was very difficult to look at. It was very busy. So I decided to simplify it and come up with basically two themes: common sense and discipline. Common sense. You should write grammatically correct, proper punctuation. Common sense. Discipline. Be consistent in the way you communicate, verbally and written. I'll give you an extreme example of this. For those of you who are fortunate enough to get an email from me, kidding, I won't be stalking you or anything, that's not what I'm suggesting. If you get an email from me, I write in complete sentences. I don't write in phrases. I don't believe in that. If you sign a contract, do you read it? Or do you just sign it? You probably should read it. But when it comes to, when I say about proper communication, I'm not just talking about legal vernacular, it's about everything and anything you author. Emails. How many of you use email every day? How many use Instagram or chat? I don't use it. I use email, but I write in complete sentences. How many of you write emails and you just sign your name at the end? You don't write regards, you don't write kindly or anything like that. You just sign your name. This is discipline. What I'm getting at is discipline, and you're going to find me very odd when I say this. Even to my family members, I don't write love, Sanjay. I write regards, Sanjay. Every single email is exactly the same. And people tell me, why do you do this? I'm your sister. Why do you do this? I'm your dad. My dad tells me, why do you talk to me like I'm an attorney? I go, no, I'm not an attorney, Dad. I play one on TV, but I'm not an attorney. It's just about discipline and effective communication. When I author something, I need to know that the person I'm writing to is going to understand and appreciate and do exactly what I'm asking them to do, or receive the information I'm asking them to receive. Why is that important? A wise professor once told me, communication is the lifeline of every relationship. So as auditors, you're sitting across the client at the entrance exam, and the client is talking to you. What should you do? It's not a trick question. What do you think you should do when they're talking to you? Listen. Here's a tip for you. If you want to become what I call an active listener versus a marginal listener, or a selective, somebody who's accused of being selective hearing, like my wife tells me all the time, make that person in front of you the most important person in your life at that moment. Period. Make that person the most important person in your life at that moment, and I guarantee you, you will migrate towards active listening, which is when you hear most. You hear most of the message, if not all of it. Communication is always on display, folks. Anybody hear something, little thing called attitude? It takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. Element of time, your demeanor and behavior. Body language. Anybody here use body language? Do you even know when you're using it? That's usually others who tell you when you're using it, whether it's appropriate or not. Physical space in different cultures, spacing is different. Technology, smartphones. What in the world do we do without phones? We got along just fine, but now phones dominate everything we do. Cultural diversity, and of course written and spoken words. I'm going to talk about communication as effective communication because it's a core foundational skill. And if you don't want to take my word for it, there's a study that came out with the Audit Executive Center earlier this year, 2018 North America Pulse. In there, communication was rated as the second most difficult skill to recruit after business acumen and critical thinking. In fact, most of the IIA leadership, including Richard Chambers, they're globetrotting, talking about with chief audit executives around the world who are saying in every single way possible that they want auditors who have superior communication skills early and often. Subject matter expertise is expected. The communication skills are hard to teach without getting the experience. But it also takes onus on the individual to make sure you improve yourself so that you can deliver the kind of service that is not only going to define your personal brand, but the audit brand, and ultimately derive value for the clients that you serve. How many of you write reports, conduct meetings? Do they all go as planned? What goes wrong? Anybody know?
Disagreement.
Disagreements. Really? Auditors have disagreements with clients? Well, we know what's going on. It's what we say goes, right? No, it doesn't work that way. It's for great. We want effective communication for greater effectiveness of verbal and written skills when deliverables. Now, I promised you I'd get back to this. This is what I call the SCREAM team. Everybody hear of the DREAM team? That's positive stuff. This is the SCREAM team. Angry audit client, skeptical audit client, criticizing audit client, uncooperative, and there are many others. Anybody experience any of these clients? Because I've experienced all of them. Segue to a very, very quick story. One of my first audit clients when I joined the state of Illinois as an internal auditor, that was back when in North America they passed a law called the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The state got, I believe it was $180 billion. So I had to go through different agencies and conduct a risk assessment so that we receive the money, manage the money, disperse the money, and monitor the money correctly in compliance with the law. I go into a room with my first client meeting. You're my first client. And I say, hello, I'm Sanjay. Guess what he tells me? I need audit like I need a hole in my head. Literally, he says that. Anyone care to know why? Because he had 2 audit groups come in before me, and none of them knew what he did or what his group did. So it helps to do due diligence, understand what your auditors, what your clients are doing. So I turned around and walked out of the room. I knocked on the door again, and I said, hello, I'm Sanjay, can we do this again? And he finally softened up, and so it's about relationship building early on. I'll get into that as we move into this presentation as well. So next polling question. We all know the polling question is working, right? No, it's not. How many of you say you're an effective communicator? Raise your hand. Come on, be proud. Don't be shy. How many of you say you have good communication skills, but you're looking to improve? That's usually where most people are. And for the real, the few, the proud, the brave, which one of you says, my skills need improvement? Nobody. That's good. That's me, actually. All right. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to sprinkle in financial concepts that are not going to be twisted around a little bit. I'm going to change them around. First one is ROR. Anyone know what ROR is in finance?
Return on investment.
That's ROI. Good try, though. Rate of return.
Yeah.
Anyone heard of rate of return?
Yes.
Well, in communication vernacular and trusted advisor status, I call it return on relationships. Okay? Because as trusted advisors, you don't become a trusted advisor unless you earn the trust and the support of those that you serve, those that you audit. But that happens when you cultivate, when you establish, nurture, just like you raise your kids, you nurture these relationships so they become collaborative relationships, where you become a person of interest when the organization is doing something new, embarking on a risky strategy or an endeavor that they haven't thought through the process clearly, or they just want another perspective. Audit has that opportunity to wear multiple lenses across the organization and think, to use the old cliche, outside the box.
But communication, it has two ends. One from
It's
the
a two-way
sender,
street.
Yeah, one from the sender and one from the receiver, in between the message. So sometimes the receiver, the problem is there, not from your side. So what do you do?
This is good. So I showed the model that I used. He prefers the older model, sender and receiver, as opposed to the common sense and discipline I was talking about. But you're right, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just all about the auditor, and it's not just about the client. There has to be a medium there. There has to be a mutual understanding, but you can't get there until you establish that relationship firsthand and then build upon it. Relationships are the foundation for trust and desirable outcomes. There's no doubt about that. But it's a two-way street. You're absolutely right. So how do we get about getting to become effective communicators? Again, over the course of my career, I put together some disciplines, if you will, some concepts that I bring to bear, and it's worked with most of my audiences beautifully, and hopefully it'll happen here too. I talk about these two concepts, 4 C's and communication styles. You encounter this every single day and you don't even know it. And if you do, you're ahead of the game. Let's start with the 4 C's, verbal and nonverbal. And I'm not talking about just body language here, I'm really focusing on the written materials that you produce. 4 C's. When you speak, as I'm speaking today, you speak clearly, concisely, coherently, and confidently. Seems simple, doesn't it? But it's not so easy. Although I will say speaking is the easy part. Preparation is the hard part, because you have to know your audience. So, no, I don't know each and every one of you, but my goal is to add to what you already know, not just simply regurgitate what you already do know. It's to add to what you've encountered. In nonverbal, 3 of the 4 are the same. Speak clearly, concisely, write clearly, concisely, coherently, but write convincingly. I'm going to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, right now. There's different modes of written communication. There's communication to entertain, communication to inform, communication to persuade, all of these. But I actually focus on only one of them, persuasion. Because regardless of whether you're informing somebody or you're entertaining somebody, you are literally eliciting an emotional, psychological and emotional response in the person that you're addressing. So even if you're informing somebody, you're actually trying to get them to think about what you're writing. That is the essence of persuasion. So why is that so important? Because we want to enhance and ensure communication effectiveness. And what do I mean by that? Here are 3 questions that I want you to somehow always think about whenever you communicate verbally or non-verbally. First one, who or what is your target recipient, target audience or recipient? Second, what is the purpose of your message to that target recipient or audience? Whether it's the audit client, the audit committee, the board, it doesn't matter who it is. Find out who it is, what is the purpose of your message to them? And last but not least, what do you want that recipient to think, believe, feel, and take action on? If you can do all four, ladies and gentlemen, you can name your own island.
So you must be in control.
You want to make sure that your message is being understood. I don't want to dictate their thoughts, but I want them to understand what you're trying to say and operationalize it in the context of what you're dealing with in terms of the issues with that client or the opportunities. It's both ends. It's not just about the bad things, it's about the good things that go unnoticed or unacted upon. Communication styles. Have any of you heard of the concept called communication styles? So what I've done over 25 plus years of experience, not including college or education, just professional experiences, basically taken notes, copious notes of everyone I've worked with, managers, executives, managers, colleagues, people under me, people next to me, etc., internal, external, and I kind of put together a list of attributes within 4 communication styles. They are transitive, collaborative, analytical, and leadership. Every single one of you in this room has one of these styles. You may not think that, but you will when you finally get out here and download these slides and look at these attributes. But we'll go over a few of them right now. Transitive. These are highly relationship-oriented folks. Now, whether you are like that as an auditor, that's one thing, but you have to recognize if your client is that way, and you adapt to that style. So in order to understand how to adapt to your client, you have to understand what your style is. That's what this is all about. Trying to get to know what you bring to the table and be able to adapt to what they bring to the table. They're focused on innovation. They tend to avoid risk. Very supportive with others, and they're active listeners. Collaborative. This is where I fit, folks. I'm very team-oriented. I don't mind working independently, but I prefer to work in a team. I'm an active risk taker, which means, I'll give you a funny example of that. How many, when you buy sophisticated electronics or equipment or anything like that, how many of you read the instructions on how to use it? One brave soul, two? I don't read them at all. How do you read this? It has no pictures. Is my reaction. So, and then half the time I always end up opening up the foreign language versions, and I can't understand that. So I sit there and try to find the English version. But I said, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to try it and see what happens. Trial and error. Spontaneous decision makers. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I don't always think things through, and I just act on whim. That's probably not a good audit trait. But I embrace challenge and change, and yes, I've already gone over the fact that I'm a marginal listener. Analytical. Thrive on data, very logical thinkers. This is fairly obvious. Focus on accuracy. And then last but not least is leadership. Very competitive, visionary thinking, entrepreneurial mindset, focus on results. As audit clients that I've had, each one of them, I've had clients that fall in each one of these categories. Now, I'm not trying to say someone has to just fit nice and neatly in one category. Truth be told, I'm actually between transitive and collaborative. Some people are between analytical and collaborative. You might think that's an oxymoron. It's not. You don't have to be. You can be a leader and still be highly social and be transitive. I'm just saying these are the overwhelming traits that I see with the people that I've worked with, and you will recognize within your style as well. And the sooner you recognize your style, the better you'll be able to adapt to the audiences that you work with. In meetings, when you conduct field work, audit field work, or your team does that. I'll tell you, when I conducted, I did a lot. Anyone hear of Sarbanes-Oxley? I met Paul. I actually met Senator Paul Sarbanes. I had him sign my agenda, and this is going to be a corny joke, but I have to share it anyways. I told him it was incomplete. You want to know why? Senator Oxley didn't sign it. He's like, could you please leave now? I said, okay. It was nice meeting Senator Sarbanes. So I recognize your style and simply adapt to others. Hey, you knew this was coming. Polling question number 3. Show of hands. How many of you think you're a transitive style? Collaborative. Analytical. Yeah, that's what I expected, lion's share. And then last but not least, leadership. I'm sorry, that's not last. What's last? Not sure. Yeah, I gotta throw that one in. Because people are not sure, not because they don't identify with one. It's usually because they identify with more than one, and that's okay.
That's also solution.
What's that?
That's also solution. You can apply different.
That's right. That's called being adaptive. The last category, remember, there are 3 categories. Anybody remember what the first 2 were? Here's a nice little test. Active listening skills. Anybody remember what the first 2 were?
Collaborative.
Hmm? Character. What was the second one? Competency. Nicely done. Okay. How'd you guess? You're right. Experience. We as auditors have experience? Yes, no? Maybe? This one's the obvious one. Again, I focus on the last attribute down here, and you'll be able to download these sites. I promise. That's what they promised me. Again, my focus from internal audit point of view is always focusing on reputational integrity, preserving the reputational integrity of that organization in everything it does. But here's the problem with developing a brand. Your personal brand, but more importantly, your audit brand. How do you quantify the value of an audit brand? How do accountants, more specifically CPAs, account for brand equity on the balance sheet? Is there a FASB on it? I mean, you could talk about goodwill impairment. That's true, but there's more to it than that. A lot of it is just I consider it nebulous, but extremely important, because once you lose that reputation, it is extremely difficult to get it back. So as auditors, we have is there a second chance to make a first impression? Yes or no? You get one chance to make a first impression, not a second. So, I'm asking all of you, you've already done this. You've put forth the effort over your careers so far. Many of you are very well experienced. You're developing your brand. There are multiple ways to develop a brand. But first you gotta recognize that you are a brand. How many of you here consider yourself a brand? Raise your hand. Why didn't all of you raise your hands? You are a brand. Look, folks, when I interviewed, as Chief Operating Officer, I interviewed the CFO that we hired for our agency. Guess what my last question was to this CFO candidate, every CFO candidate? If you could be any brand in the world, which one would you be and why? Is that really an astute question for a CFO level candidate? No, probably not. But you know what? I want to see how they would react and what they would say. One person said, "I'll be Nike, just do it." Okay. It was well said. One person said, "I really haven't thought of myself a brand. I don't know." Okay, that's too bad. How many would say consider yourself a brand like Apple? Innovative. How about IBM or the airline we flew in on, my cousin and I, Emirates, a fantastic experience. I mean, there's a reason why the tagline says world's best airline in 2017. Oh, but that wasn't my little plug for Emirates, but it's pretty damn good. Then I say, what brand would you not be? How many of you heard a company called Enron?
Don't tell me.
I used to be with Arthur Anderson. No, I had nothing to do with that. But I'm going to tell you, as auditors, we should have known something was wrong when the logo was a crooked E. See what I mean? A crooked E. And there's another little sidebar I use with that. We have a weatherman. Anybody here watch the weather on occasion? We have a weatherman in Chicago. His name is Tom Skilling. The CFO for Enron was Jeffrey Skilling. They're brothers. What do they have in common? They both get paid to be wrong. One legally and one illegally. So now you've developed your brand. I encourage you to continue enhancing your brand. How do you do that? Here are some of the things that we do. Anyone here have a LinkedIn profile? I look forward to connecting with you. Facebook, okay, I put that up there because it's dominating the market out there, in terms of what it can do for you, but also in bad news right now. So I don't call it social media. For some of you I met at the conference already, I call it social risk. I stay away from it because what you say can and will be used against you in public. So I just stay away from it. But it is a way to enhance your brand based on what you obviously post. Your audit client testimonials, they are pure validation of what you bring to the table. Anyone disagree? Professional references, if you haven't gotten them, I encourage you to receive them. LinkedIn used to be very good at doing this. They have kind of moved away from that a little bit, but now they ask you for endorsing people's skills, which is it's similar, but references are far more powerful. You can have a personal website. Professional recognition, you can have every C credential under the sun. I'll get to that. That's very nice to have, but well, as I'll talk on a following slide, it's not the most important thing in the world, and I'll tell you why. Knowledgeable practitioner, subject matter expert, trusted advisors is the ultimate goal. So let me boil this down to, because of my days at Arthur Andersen, I know something about called acronyms. I use them all over the place. So I said, okay, how do I bridge this whole concept of personal brand, audit brand together, with brand being in the middle? And this is what I came up with, and this is what I truly believe in. B is believe, or on the left side is personal brand, on the right side is audit brand. Both put together, personal brand plus audit brand equals trusted advisor. If you want to think of an equation, that's the equation. Believe, reputation, attitude, network, determination on the left. Broad view, relationships, adaptability. I love that word because it's two words fused together, adapt and ability. Everyone see that? Neutrality, and then demonstrate your skills. So this slide brings it all together. You have in the middle the three categories I've been harping at: character, competency, and credibility, personal brand, and trusted advisor. So remember I told you, you can have every C credential under the sun, you can have multiple master's degrees, PhD. I think that's fabulous. You have subject matter expertise, you have incredible knowledge. But that, I'm going to tell you right now, that tells me that you belong. What separates you from the crowd is how you develop and establish and project your personal brand. How you parlay that knowledge and experience into value for your client. And why is that important? Because I don't want us to think of anyone to think of us as watchdogs. We're more than that. We add value to the organizations that we serve. Why? Because we're trying to earn a seat at the table. I told you I did a lot of SOX consulting. And another client, to this day, the CFO calls me for advice on what he's doing with his Mexico affiliates in his North America operation. In fact, they were going to go public because they were going to be bought by a company that was public, and therefore by that very notion they would have to be SOX compliant. That deal fell through. He still called me 6 months later and said, you documented all these controls, I want you to go and test them. He called me again a year later saying, you don't have to do this, Jack. You're not subject to that rigor. He goes, yeah, but you taught me you don't know what you don't know is a huge risk. So I'll give you a quick comical story. We go to the Western Division located in near Sacramento, California. I don't know if you folks have seen on the highway those giant steel coils. They're very large, they're very heavy. I recommend you stay out of their way. 60,000 kilograms or more. They're in the warehouse and they're all tagged, except for one. Front row and center, 60,000 kilogram steel coil. I called the plant manager over. He goes, well, wow, you found it. We were looking for that all day. It's right in the front. So listen, folks, if they didn't tag it, what do you think happens? It didn't get logged in the inventory. So that produced favorable numbers, if you know what I mean, on a monthly basis. So when that happened, the CFO basically called me every 6 months and said, we want you to do the testing. Moral of that story is that he didn't have to do it, but because of the relationships I forged with him, and I tell you right now, my team collectively and individually knew more than me, but my job was to manage the client, to establish, nurture, and manage the client, so that we would get called back over and over again. Not just for testing, but for new adventures that they got into in Mexico and in Europe. That's what it's all about, being invited to the table, not just once, but repeatedly, for either the same activity or new endeavors that the organization is going to. And let's not forget, brand equals trusted advisor, and that means there's a impact on your careers. How many of you here want to be chief audit? Well, how many of you are chief audit executive now? Would you agree that becoming a trusted advisor is a path to lead to chief audit executive? Yes? Does that mean everyone should be a chief audit executive? In fact, when I got hired by Arthur Anderson, truth be told, partner asked me, do you want to be a partner? I said, no. They still hired me. Not because of that answer, but because of how I articulated I would add value to the organization. But no, I had no desire to be a partner. Yes, question?
Clearance of the audit, of what they are going to do, regardless if they are trust you or no. How can we differentiate between trusting and avoiding responsibility?
Maintaining ethics. You want to be, obviously, you're asking, you want to maintain ethics as an auditor because the client has asked you to do what?
What should I do? I'm advising him.
You're advising him based on your ability and what you have observed, what you've tested, what you've evaluated. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll give you a SOX example for that, and this will hit it home hard. I sat next to a client and we developed the test script, and he realized the control was going to fail and it was going to cause a cascading effect on other controls. He said, "Can we change this question so the response is yes?" I said, "Absolutely no. But if you want to, sign here. You do the explaining. I'm not going to do it." I know that's a little comical. It's a little maybe a little exaggerating, but the point of the story is you stick to your ethics. Absolutely. You're going to be pressured by a client and we all experience this. You get pressured by the client to say, "Wait a second. To me, findings are not negotiable. They can be, but they really shouldn't be. Depends on how they're written. If they're written in a confrontational, remember what I said, adverse judgment oriented manner, that opens the door for that type of situation. But we want to write them so they're actionable and practical in such a way that they understand we have just basically opined on what it is they are supposed to do according to the policies they developed. So my question, you've heard the story, or you've heard the situation that you don't respond to a question with a question, except for this exception. I'm not trying to be a poet, but this is an exception. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's all clear, and I know that sometimes I'm truly advising them.
Yes.
But are they approaching me because they are trusting me, or they approaching me because you are the auditor who will judge and assess what is going on later?
I hope it's both. That they trust you. It depends on how you cultivate the relationship and the audits that you've done before and the interaction that you've had with that particular client. If you're just a yes person, I hope they're not relying on that. But if you're giving independent, objective advice, I hope that they recognize that you bring value to the table based on what you are assessing and what they're doing.
I believe it's a matter of culture.
It's culture.
It's culture. This is what I believe, because some of them will trust you, and some of them will avoid your criticize. That's why they approach you. Even you are the best advisor ever, it doesn't mean that the auditee will accept you as a friend, because at the end of the day you are evaluating process
There's
and controls.
there's a fine line there. I'm looking for good established business relationships where we're strong colleagues, we're business partners, but I avoid the use of word friends. This is not about me making sure that the client looks good. Even though in consulting, it's all one of the number one things in consulting, forget about audit, just consulting in general, is to get your client promoted. Okay, that's the mantra. That's what you want to live up to. You want to shine the spotlight on the client. But when it comes to audit, there is no substitute for objectivity and independence. I give them the good, bad, and the ugly, whether they like it or not. But I do it in such a way that it's not confrontational, it's not adverse judgment oriented, and it's not based on whatever happened in the past. This is something new that we're doing now. This has nothing to do with what happened in the past, nor does it have anything to do with what's going to happen in the future. In the same notion, look, when it comes to risk, how many of you think risk is just a hazard and something bad that's going to happen? Yes or no? What is risk? Probability. Another word for probability is variability of some outcome. Uncertainty. Well said. Uncertainty of some outcome is what I always focus on. Go ahead.
In order the risk is something to reduce the probability of reaching to the organization.
the way I think of risk, and you folks may agree or disagree, is risk is the same thing. Risk is recognizing what could go wrong, but also understanding what must go right, and achieving a balance between the two. To expand it further, risk is the balance between the capacity to bear risk and the willingness to take it. From an individual standpoint, from a group standpoint, department standpoint, from an organizational standpoint. Your capacity to bear risk versus your propensity to take on the risk.
So to build a brand, you have to have a good relationship.
Starts
Right.
with relationships.
Right?
Yes.
Starts with the relationships. Now you develop the relationship in order to be a trusted advisor. Unfortunately, that relationship sometimes, as what he said, sometimes it get misused in order to influence you to have a different either or opinion or what. So being a trusted advisor doesn't impair your independence. How it will affect your independence?
If you the only way it's going to affect your independence is if you let it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not easy. I've been there.
Yeah, but again, you'll always be perceived as hard-headed. You are not collaborative. This is from the auditee perspective, and this is what, no matter how much you are doing, trying to educate, trying to communicate, trying to collaborate with them, give them advice, they approach you, no matter what. Still, that kind of relationship, always it's a behavioral.
Inevitably, you're
And
always
culture things.
It's a cultural thing, and you're inevitably going to experience that kind of friction in the relationship.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I'm literally, as an experienced auditor, as a trusted advisor that I've wanted to become and have, in my opinion, become. The issue for me is I am here to evaluate what you're supposed to do according to what the policies and procedures that govern what you do. And in many cases, it's what they've developed on their own. I'm not introducing anything. I'm not trying to introduce anything new. But I'm not going to simply say you did something wrong. I'm going to say I'm going to present the case as diplomatically as possible without eroding the notion of objectivity and independence, to demonstrate to them a clear understanding of where I like to call them issues, rather than saying where you did something wrong. Where the process went awry. Where the expected outcomes were not the expected outcome. I'm not here to figure out why. I can, but I'm here to point out what was supposed to happen didn't happen, and get into a dialogue as to why it didn't happen. So does that help?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about this again. And this is,
I'll get to you in a second.
in relation to it. I just came from one of the lecture and said the role of internal audit or whatever, or audit, it's evolving from assurance to advisors then to participant. Once you get there through your branding and being a participant, that means you are influencing and you are making kind of a decision on behalf of the of the management. So still probably will be like a sort of a conflict will be there.
I think the best way I can position this is up front. I used to tell all my audit clients, what you're going to see is an independent and objective analysis of what we were asked to do. You are going to hear what is good, you're going to hear what is bad, you're going to hear what is ugly, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it in any way. We're going to have a practical discussion on this. As an advisor, of the two words trusted advisor, which are powerful words, the one I focus on is the advisor. The trust is implied. In order for you to be an advisor, you have to be trusted. There's no other way you can be an advisor, not in my book. The word advisor carries a lot of weight. If I'm going to be advisor, I'm going to tell you what it is, the way it is. I'm not going to present it as if, well, you're doing this now, but this is what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to present that in terms of risk assessment, but I'm not going to sit here and say, pretend I have a crystal ball and say this is what's going to happen if you keep going this way. I'm just going to tell them what's going on now, and then I'll assess future risk as well. But the point is, you got to tell them what's happening now. You got to tell them clearly, and I'm going to tell them up front. This is not going to be This is not just going to be a relationship that results in me always bending the rules, or just simply wanting to agree with what your assessment is. My assessment is independent of yours, and we will have to come to an agreement. But I laid that foundation up front. When I did the SOX consulting, it was a lot of billable hours for auditors, I get it. I wasn't in it for that, because everybody got SOX, I call it SOX in the box. What that means is SOX 101. I had everybody in my client, from the mailroom clerk to the CFO, in my training session. And if they refused, I rescheduled it and made sure they were there. Everybody plays a role in SOX. I don't care who you are. Everybody can have an impact. So it was not just an icebreaker. It was a clear understanding of what we were going to do, what was expected of them, and where things could go, where we could have some issues, but we would work through them. I was able to provide that type of a background and that type of structure, and I laid down the communication rules as well, based on what they desired, what they expected, and how we were going to deliver. It got to a point where, I'll just give you another example, where we had a Chicago team, we had a Houston team, and we had an Atlanta team. The Chicago team was extremely thorough in what we did, but Houston and Atlanta did not do the same thing. And you might say, because we didn't communicate with each other, yeah, that's true, we didn't. We didn't do things on our own, but I don't believe in overselling and underdelivering. That's not my job. Whether you're a salesperson or you're an auditor, it doesn't matter what you are. You don't oversell and underdeliver. You never do that. You run the risk of ruining the relationship right there. But my director got a call from the CFO saying, what the hell's going on? Chicago's doing it this way, but Houston and Atlanta is doing it completely opposite. I got chastised for producing a much better work product than my colleagues in Houston and Atlanta. But in the end, we extended the relationship because of the approach we took. He wanted to know what was wrong. He wasn't here for me to be a yes person. But I nurtured the relationship that way, such that you're going to get exactly what the story is. I'm not going to paint it so that it's going to go over well with your superiors, whether it be the CEO, whether it be the board, whoever it is. So you're going to run into those difficult situations. My simple advice as an advisor is to stand your ground. It's hard to do that. Some people get into a situation where, oh, that limits your advancement. Well, that's shame on them. That's not the way it should be. Any other questions? Yeah, I promise I'll get to you.
Right. So, are you saying it's better to be feared than to be loved? In Machiavelli's, for internal auditors, it's better to be feared than to be loved.
I think it's better to be respected.
Yes.
This isn't about fear or love. If you want to use love, I have a passion for the goals and objectives of the organization and playing a small part in achieving those desired outcomes. But I'm not here to instill fear on anybody. We are here to work together. Remember, I told you, what's the first word in internal audit? It's internal. We're the same family. There is no reason for this friction. But the reason you have the friction is because they have numbers they have to meet on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or an annual basis. I get it. They don't want to be called out negatively. Now, listen, I joined the Illinois Power Agency. We had 35 audit findings. In my interview, the director told me, I need you to get rid of each of these 35 findings. I said, are you serious? By when? In 1 year. Really? So you know what I did is I pulled out a sheet of paper and I drew them a chart. 35 audit findings. They're going to go down, and they're going to go back up, and then you're going to see the downward trend. Now, you may choose to believe me or not, but I'm telling you, honest to God, 35, 23, 17, 9, 1, 0. I did everything right, but actually come up with the numbers, because if I had come up with the numbers, I'd played the lottery that day. Okay, but I told them exactly how it would happen, because it takes time to implement internal controls. In fact, they wanted to hire me as a chief internal auditor. I said, we're not going to do that, because I'm not going to be able to erase these 35 findings if I can't tell you what to do. So you bring me as a chief operating officer, I don't have to worry about the independence now. I can tell you what to do. I can test them internally, but then I can deal with the auditors and make sure that everything works out. And it did. Remember, 35, 23, 17, 9, 1, 0. I drew him that curve. And that's exactly how it happened, how it unfolded. But I wasn't going to sit here and say, well, I didn't say, yes, I'm going to get rid of the third. I never said that. I simply said, here's how it's going to unfold. And my goal is to get to 0, but I didn't guarantee that. Like, we only have 6 people in our agency, so we have something called segregation of duties. So I have control after control. We have only 22 processes, but we have nearly 500 controls because of segregation of duties, overlap. And the auditors make sure they're watching over everything we do. But it's not a confrontational relationship. It's not an adversarial relationship. Now we ask them to come over, and when we're embarking on 2 new energy programs in the renewable energy market. We're inviting them to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. What should we think about when it comes to risk? That's a collaborative relationship that we forged. Any other questions? Otherwise, I've kept you long enough, and you've been very, very good. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
So how come they will take you as advisor? And advisor is means by trust and is by choice. You choose someone to be